Welcome to the Hotspot. I'm your host, Arman Dezfuli-Arjomandi. Today we have a conversation with Abhay Kumar, Chief Product Officer at Helium Inc. Abhay shares the latest details about when validators are launching on Mainnet, opinions about reward splitting on-chain, and a very cool demo of the new Helium Zodiac NFTs, which you will not want to miss. Abhay, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Arman. It's been a while.
Yeah, for real. It's really cool to have you here. You're actually one of the first community members that I interacted with. And
Right.
what's funny is that you are now a Helium team member, but you weren't always. You started as a community member and you made this website called Mylar, which was like the first ever Helium hotspot earnings tracking tool. I think at some point like 52 or 53% of all the hotspots on the network were tracked on it just because it was like the best. It was like the only thing. And then eventually you went black. You stopped developing updates and then suddenly you're on the Helium team. So yeah, like how'd that happen?
Yeah, no, it's kind of wild. Yeah, I think we got to talking to each other because of Mylar, and yeah, I built this app. And some folks may already know the story, but I had about 10 hotspots early on back in 2019. We were you and I were there in the Slack days before we all moved over to Discord, and we had there was a need, right, for you and for me and for a lot of other folks in the community who had more than 3 hotspots, and we wanted to be able to track how our things were going, and so I built Mylar mostly because I was just left another job, and this is what I was doing full time. I was like learning about Helium, and I was hanging out with my kids. Those are my two jobs at the time.
That's amazing.
And so and after several months, I think you mentioned over I think at the peak it was 58% of the network was covered by Mylar, which is more because there wasn't another tool. Like, let's be honest, it was a very basic tool and it was good enough for what I needed. I'm really glad that people found it useful, and apparently people continue to find it useful, which boggles my mind given all the other community apps that are out there, given all the improvements that the Helium team has made to Explorer. If I were going to build Mylar again, I'd probably go use Hotspotty or Helisum or a variety of tools that are out there. I mean, even Fairspot, your tool, you have a tax tool in there, which I think is great for folks that need to manage that, especially in the next month or within this month when for
hopefully they've already managed it.
Or if you're doing it like I do, which is I sort of defer to the October timeframe, and I do it in June.
That's also valid.
So this is when I deal with my taxes. So tools like that are really great in the ecosystem. And my role at Helium now is to try to enable the team to build what we think we are uniquely positioned to be able to build, but then enable the community to build everything else. This community only exists because of folks in the ecosystem building things, and I think that. That's what we want to see as core team members.
Yeah, the ecosystem's really exploded since the Mylar days because, as you said, it was really the only thing, and now there are like 10 things, and they're all really good and high quality. And back then, it just felt like a little club where, like, at midnight, it was just silent. No one was talking anymore, and there was no activity. And now there's like 70,000 members in the Discord, which is just like nuts.
My goodness! And there's people talking on voice chat 24/7. I don't think I've ever seen that chat quiet, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's funny. I accidentally double-clicked the voice chat the other day, and I was like, "Oh crap! Hi guys!" And they were like, "Hey Arman, what's up?" I was like, "Oh my god, what's going on? Why are there so many people in here?" But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you've come so far from Mylar, and now you're the chief product officer, and you're managing the blockchain team, and you're also managing proof of coverage. So that's a lot of responsibility. How's it going?
Really well. I mean, we're a small team, right? And as a lot of members of the community know, we're only the company that sort of started the Helium network is only 40 people at this point. So we have over 20 engineers, product managers, designers, and then we have a sales and marketing team. But we want to stay scrappy. And my background is much larger tech companies, and one of my goals was to work at a company that never planned on being that big. And this is great. And I think it's possible in crypto. We can be core developers or some of the core developers. Ultimately, we want to not be the only ones. We want to allow other folks. Well, honestly, I just want to give folks in the community who are interested commit access to the miner repo, to the blockchain core repo. We got our first real significant contribution by a really early member of the Helium community, early miner, Steven S1 or Alpha Method on Discord. And he built a something that he needed for a project that he's working on in blockchain node, but it's actually something that we're pulling into ETL now. This is a way to track the implicit burns and all the kinds of data credit burns that happen in the system. And that was an enormous effort, and we're really sort of glad to see things like this happening in the community.
Well, that's a direct contribution that I will be able to use and many people will benefit from, because I'll be able to add that to the tax tool and track implicit burns, which was one of the biggest things that was missing. So that's so awesome.
That was the community that said, a member of the community who's been a miner. He's been to the office a very, very long time ago. He said, I need this for this project I'm working on. So can I open a pull request? And we're like, absolutely, please, let's do it.
That's the goal, right? Is eventual decentralization of the community owning the project and the Helium team not even having to exist or make commits. Obviously, we still want you guys around, but if it's truly decentralized, things will be more owned by the community.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit, and our interest in this. We've talked about that all along. Scott from the DY kind of presented an idea around that at the last community call. Around there being kind of two spheres of influence in the Helium network. There's the sort of DY, sort of the alliance, and the board of directors, and then the core developers. But I think one thing that Scott was intentionally not specific about was that the core developers didn't have to make up of Helium Inc. team members, right? It could be anyone in the community, and Helium Inc. happens to be some of them. And that's how we want this to be long term.
Well, I'm sure it will continue in that direction. But until then, you guys have got so much to tackle, especially with all the recent growth. And one thing I want to dive into is validators. Sure. We've been running in testnet for a few months now. It seems like it just started, and now it seems like it's about to be over. So I want to know a little bit about how that's going. How is testnet going? Are we wrapping up testnet? I noticed there was a survey circulated to nominate who was most helpful during testnet, which made me feel like we're finishing testnet.
Yeah, so we went into testnet thinking, and we started thinking about validators and started building in earnest in January of this year. And so for us to be coming into June, and we set this idea of Q2 as a launch deadline, which is most people in the crypto ecosystem kind of laughed at us about it, because they're like, well, you're changing your entire you're changing everything about your network. You're changing economics, you're changing participants, you're doing a lot of change. If you look at other proof of stake networks and their test nets, they run 1-2 years before they're launched. And the difference sort of is we had a network already beforehand. We had a lot of the fundamentals. We had libp2p, we had elections, we had this consensus group and block production and how to use their blocks. All those kinds of things were already there. We also needed to invent a lot of new things that made sense for our network, and we did that. And that's what we've been doing over the testnet, is we've been trying to understand what do we need to do to think about this new paradigm, which is block production happening on cloud nodes, like on AWS, on GCP, or in data centers, right? And in real data centers, not little Raspberry Pis sitting on your tabletop.
Yeah, it's almost like a miracle that it worked. I've said this probably I sound like a broken record at this point saying this on this podcast, but I still can't believe it works. It's definitely getting towards the end of the line of how much it could work, though. So I'm sure you guys are just pushing and pushing and pushing to get this out safely as soon as humanly possible.
Just to think about what it is, it's 50,000 Raspberry Pis connected over libp2p across the world, and going through odd NAT and carrier NAT and some IPv6, IPv4 proxies, just every kind of networking setup that you could have. Is this network is connected to each other, and that's really quite incredible. I don't think libp2p was intended to scale to this size, and we were sort of stunned that we got it past 5,000 nodes. We had to continue to make changes along the way, and we had to acknowledge this the other day in Discord. We had to make a lot of changes over the last several months and over the last several weeks specifically to try to stabilize block production. We had to try to stabilize the network as a whole to get it to validate. Ultimately, we're doing this so that we can get to the next phase of the network. The next phase of scaling, we want to see 200, 300, 500. The other day I was telling somebody in the team that we should plan on helping. Our next real milestone should be 1 million connected nodes on the network, and this could be light nodes, this could be full miners, just all of these kinds of participants in total. That's what we should scale for.
Well, if we reach 50,000 nodes on this loosely connected, to misuse a technical term, network, it seems like we could get to 1 million on a much stronger foundation of having data centers with high-powered machines powering the blockchain and powering the P2P connections, and having more light clients that are talking over gRPC instead of having this crazy web of peer-to-peer interconnectivity. What's left? What is left for us to get from where we are now to get to that future?
Yeah, and so I think there's a couple of different things that so as you noticed, we did land a significant portion of the blockchain core code. Ultimately we wanted to land all of the code that was relevant around all the chain bars that we would need to activate, so that we would make sure that block production continue to have. There's a lot of downstream customers now. We have open source routers that are also blockchain nodes. We have multiple manufacturers running now multiple different versions of the miner software. So we wanted to give them all a few weeks at least of buffer to know that they would all be upgraded, because we don't control all the OUIs anymore, right? Which is part of the point. We don't want to. We don't want to be the only router and console in the network. And so that's what we were our intention there was to land blockchain core so that we could enable staking and then eventually enable blockchain elections. And those are the sort of two phases that are next. One is we want to enable the stake validator transaction, give everyone a chance to be able to bring a validator online on mainnet and stake it. And then so that when we enable electing, everyone kind of has a fair shake and sort of being added to the consensus group. And then once we sort of go through that the initial election process, it'll still be the same consensus group size in the beginning. We'll slowly start to ramp up the consensus group size as well. And that's, our goal long term is, to have a 30, 40 member group. 16 members isn't really sufficient for a 50,000 node project.
So it looks like everything is about 2 or 3 weeks away. Like maybe that's when people start to be able to stake. Do you anticipate that there might be any other things that you need to wait for other than just giving the whole ecosystem time to upgrade?
So because we control the firmware of a lot of nodes that are out there, we're able to very rapidly push code. And we had to do that over the last weekend, right? We had to do an emergency release because we had a chain halt. And this is something that we have it's a crutch that's available to us today, but that won't exist with validators. You've definitely heard of other networks having to do a sort of a call to arms, right? Like all validators come online. We have a chain halt. We need you to do X, Y, and Z in this order in order to get us to continue to produce blocks. And this is a very big change. We don't get to, and you know about it, and a lot of members of the community know about it. We don't get to burrow into hotspots anymore, right? Because the block production is happening on validators. And so, that's something that we're very cognizant of. It's a major upgrade to the network. It's a major sort of upgrade towards decentralization. But we have to be reverent towards that. And so those are the things that we think about. And so, having the right telemetry around what is happening on every node, that's something that we're working on. Making sure that nodes will automatically skip blocks or skip transactions that may not ever come into consensus. That's something that we need to be able to do, or the consensus group, and by we I mean the consensus group need to be able to do. And those are the things that we're sort of working on right now, where we're sort of finalizing things like auto skip and things like like what are the penalties, what are the sort of DKG penalties that need to be set, and those are the sort of the last things that we believe need to be in before we would feel comfortable activating elections.
It looks like there are a lot of ecosystem partners that are eagerly waiting for you guys to reach that milestone of activating elections. There have been a bunch of validator as a service projects come up in the last few months. Many have run on Testnet and provided access to clients during Testnet, which I thought was very cool. Like we were all practicing together. And a few very well-known companies have announced support for Helium validators as well. So Akash, which is another sort of decentralized AWS type blockchain project, announced support for decentralized Helium validators, which I thought was very cool. And another big staking company called Bison Trails, owned by Coinbase, also announced support. I noticed there was a little bit of confusion because they announced that they had worked with the Helium team to reduce the Unstake cooldown from 5 months to 3 months. And as I understand, that's not even possible without using the HIP process. And you guys did come out with a public correction to say that that is not actually happening. So what exactly happened there?
Yeah, the story there is, it sort of goes all the way back to when we started the HIP. So when we released the HIP around validators, we picked a couple of different numbers around amount of locked up HNT, so amount of staked HNT, the amount of time that it would be in an unbonding period, and then also some other minimums of how many validators we want to have, and sort of the idea that actually initially we had this notion that you could over or under stake. It wouldn't mean anything, but you could do it. So we had to, through development, we resolved a lot of the questions that we had around what we wanted to implement for launch. And one of the things that we implemented was let's just only allow a 10,000 HNT stake. Another thing that we talked about early on, and I remember sort of talking about it in the community back in February. It's like, what if we reduce the cooldown period, and why is the cooldown period long, and why is it longer for us versus other networks that are out there? Ultimately, we need to do the right thing for our network, right? And you can't really compare our network to Ethereum or Solana or Polkadot or anything. They're all different kinds of proof of stake, right? Some are delegated, some are nominated, some are, so something like Ethereum, like it's just a single stake amount, 32 ETH. So, it is important to understand what else is out there in the ecosystem and crypto as a whole, but it's also important for us to, as a community, to do the right thing for this network, right? And ultimately, the very, very long, from the outsider perspective, cooldown is actually not very long for us as insiders. We want folks staking who have a kind of a long-term view, like a long time preference for this network, and are willing to put up that amount of HNT for a long period of time. There were conversations early on about us reducing the cooldown period, but we never really formalized that as a HIP or as an amendment to the HIP. And even though we were having these conversations, we as a team, myself and Evan and Amir and Professor and some other folks on the team, and we talked about this, that we should consider a different number. We never really made that public, and that is on us for not really being explicit about it. We were just hinting about it in the community, and then thought, all along that we'll probably publish this at some point. So we did, and I did on I guess last Monday at this point. We pulled it back pretty much within hours because we kind of felt it, and we also got the feedback very quickly that if this is a change that we want to make, that we want to propose, it should go through a governance process, a real governance process, and something like the one that was proposed in one of the latest HIPs around governance by token burn, or maybe there's some other governance processes that could exist for chain bars. Ultimately this is a chain bar. The withdrawal period is something that will be controllable by the community via chain variable through some governance process going forward as a network, and that's something that we can revisit. And so it's something that if there are members of the community that want to revisit this, I think they should.
So if someone wants to propose reducing the cooldown period from 5 months to 3 months, at this point the next step of action would be to write a HIP and discuss it on the DY community call.
I think that's right, and that's I think what the community expects us to do at this point.
Speaking of HIPs, I know that there's been a lot of chatter about HIP 24, which was introduced a while ago. So for those who are not familiar with HIP 24, it essentially introduces on-chain reward splitting. So the basic idea is that you could take a hotspot, and instead of having all of its rewards go to one wallet, you could have half of the rewards go to one wallet or half of the rewards to other. You could have 3 different wallets receive the rewards. You could change the percentages that each wallet would receive, and essentially that would take all the mining rewards each epoch every 30 minutes and split them between all those different wallets on chain without anyone having to do anything in terms of paying each other out or anything off chain. It would just all happen on chain. And there was a lot of discussion when this first came up. Since then it died down, but I noticed a bit of a resurgence. And I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts to share on that HIP.
I can see a lot of value in having the ability to do an on-chain split. The author of the HIP, Eric Bonesaw, is he and I spoke very early on when he was writing this HIP about sort of what this could look like, and I was very much in favor of the idea of being able to do some kind of split of rewards. Split of ownership I think is a little harder, and I don't necessarily want our network to get mired in the sort of local legalities of ownership, and ultimately that's one of my concerns, I guess, on even reward splitting. How does this overlap with off-chain sort of legal structure that might exist? And we are in the United States, and we should not presume that our laws will apply everywhere in the world. And this is a global network, and it is important for us to be sort of separate from that. And we shouldn't have to think about those. I still think there is a need in the ecosystem for some way to split rewards, and I think this can happen off chain personally. And the reason why I personally think that is we want to make sure that the blockchain is kind of true to what it's for, right? It is intended to incentivize the deployment of wireless infrastructure. It is And although it would be easier for certain deployers, certain kinds of deployers of wireless infrastructure, and certainly, you have, you could certainly also use this, and I could too. Having the blockchain have to do this sort of management of the splitting is actually fairly expensive. We aren't a generic smart contract chain. We're not looking to allow any kind of contract to exist on this blockchain, and we want to be very, very specialized for this one use case. So I would say that we should probably, this is really just a matter of focus. Maybe it's kind of a maximalist view of what the Helium blockchain is supposed to do, and it's supposed to do a few things very, very well. The other thing to think about, and something that it's taken me a little bit to like truly understand, but it's come from all the scaling issues that we've had. The rewards transaction is the most expensive block to produce and the largest block to distribute across the network. And that only gets worse as there are more hotspots on the network. And if we made a major improvement to the actual block size and the transaction as the rewards transaction with rewards v2, and that was an incredible amount of work by Mark Allen and our team. But even the sort of calculation of that reward is still fairly expensive. And just kind of imagining, let's say 10% of the network decides to use reward splits, and they decide to split 2 or 3 ways. We are thinking about a pretty incredible increase in the complexity of that calculation. So I think what the community probably cares about, what do we do instead, right? Like, this is still a need. There's a product need here. When I was building Mylar a long time ago, I was actually thinking of this as a product feature that Mylar would provide because it didn't exist. And I'm sure other folks with way more hotspots than I did are thinking about still. I think we are moving the network to be more compatible with other blockchains that are out there. And I think that's something that we should, strongly consider. I think bridges to other chains, bridges to smart contract chains might be an opportunity here, right? What the 2 major things that I'd like sort of point the community towards is sort of upgrade to the threshold cryptography that we did, started supporting the BLS curve, and then the support for multi-sigs. Those 2 features really were, first of all, upgrades to the network itself. The threshold cryptography improvement will help us scale the consensus group, and that's great. But it'll also help enable some sort of interesting cross-chain things as well. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Thorchain, but it's sort of an interesting project that's out there in the ecosystem that allows cross-chain swaps. There are also other sort of more native cross-chain protocols out there. Cosmos has I think it's called the IBC, and then Solana has Wormhole, and these are 2 really really interesting projects that allow kind of cross-chain interactions, and I think that sort of cryptography upgrade that we did, potentially allows us to do something like that as well. And then an on-chain multi-sig is another thing that we could that will definitely help with sort of building that kind of infrastructure, and really look to the community to think of ideas like that and start to build in that direction if that's something that they really want. We could certainly do something really simple. I don't know if you noticed this with HIP 26, I think was payment memos. We picked a very simple path, right? We picked the sort of HIP was about being able to send full text messages to other to other folks via a memo, and that would bring on a significant amount of overhead to the blockchain to be able to store all that, and then also concerns around like, hey, what's on there? Like, what if somebody puts something on there that's inappropriate? Like, is the chain now responsible for that? Like, that's there forever, and we should think about that. So instead, what we did is we built the sort of similar memo system as we had for token burn, where you can put a small little thing in there, and that could refer to something that's off chain. Maybe a message that's off chain that you'll retrieve. So we try to build things that allow that kind of flexibility, that allow that kind of interoperability with other things that could be off chain or cross chain, right? And that's our goal ultimately. We want something like this to exist. We could do something like maybe split the rewards address from the actual owner address, and if the rewards address happens to be an Ethereum address or a Solana address, that could trigger something really interesting across chain where an actual smart contract is fired.
I cannot wait to see people start building these types of cross-chain solutions. I just think it's so cool. It's like the ultimate decentralization, and it's just like using smart contract platforms in the way they're intended to be used and the way they're best used. My mind goes crazy thinking about all the stuff that can be done with Solana. I'm just such a huge fan of it.
Me too.
Yeah, the Helium chain has supported a lot of these features for the longest time. I mean, you've had hash time lock contracts in there since like basically the beginning. I'm pretty sure Amir, the CEO, wrote that himself. So it's been in there for a while. You've got multi-sig now. You've got the different elliptical curve and whatnot. Actually, I'm not an expert on that stuff, but it all seems like it's really useful.
We as the Helium network should stay good at what we're really good at, which is incentivizing wireless infrastructure build out. And we should enable folks in the community and folks in other communities to build these bridges towards like really generic smart contracts that are out there that people want. We shouldn't necessarily have to build a DAO on top of the Helium blockchain. We shouldn't necessarily build an NFT inside of the Helium blockchain. And we shouldn't, even though this is something that we're all interested in. And we certainly this week's announcement is one of those things.
Oh wow, you really baited it there with this week's announcement. I'm very excited to get to that. I definitely want to offer a little bit of additional perspective on HIP24 as well as someone who is a fleet owner. For those of you who don't know, I run a company called FairSpot, and we have a bunch of hosts, and we pay them out every week. And HIP24 was something I was initially really excited about. I love what you're talking about with decentralized solutions. What I've come up with as a solution to my own problem is a centralized solution, much like you were building with Mylar. And I could see the advantage of something like HIP24 basically bridging the user experience for someone who doesn't have that many coding skills or is just working with a small number of hosts. But really, I think there are a lot of actually downsides to it, and that aren't even related to chain bloat, but actually are just related to logistics. First of all, it's just really, really easy to do an off-chain script that will calculate earnings. This is like one of the very first things I did with my hosting company. You can write it in a day or two. You can use the Helium API, or you can run your own ETL instance. Once you have that going, it's very, very easy to do these reward split calculations. Like it's just like totally trivial. And one thing I've noticed is like our hosts love the predictable payouts every Friday. Like they love payout day, getting one lump sum. And a lot of people don't think about like regulatory or tax things, but like this has multiple advantages, right? This really simplifies people's taxes. We pay them out directly. That means we can collect a W-9 from them and give them a 1099 form to make their taxes easier. They're only dealing with 52 transactions per year instead of, I checked, it's about 16 to 17,000 transactions if you're mining for a full year, and you get rewards every epoch. And it really helps us in the regulatory side of things. Crypto is somewhat of a legal/tax gray area. So collecting these tax forms and issuing forms and reporting all this to the IRS, having ourselves as a middleman is, I think, a good signal to regulators. If there's ever scrutiny on us, less liability for us as a middleman of sorts who is collecting and then redistributing funds. I think it's a lot easier to make a case that we're doing that in a traditional, predictable way that regulators are very familiar with. And I think it's important to retain control as a hotspot hosting service. You're giving out these hotspots for free. If someone turns their hotspot off and you're on some sort of automatic split program, they're just going to keep getting the rewards until you issue some sort of chain command, or maybe you don't even remember to do that. If you have control of the funds, then you can withhold funds in the case that someone is doing something that you don't like. So I think that's also a really important thing. And yeah, lastly, we are concerned about the chain bloat, and I agree with the scope minimization argument of just the Helium blockchain should do what it's good at and no more. And these systems are very, very limited. This isn't some centralized database where you can just crank the AWS instance. Every byte of data that goes in the chain and has to be communicated across the network has a tremendous cost. So you really want to only communicate the bytes that you said, just like the payment V2 memos that you mentioned, right? It's 8 bytes allowed. I think that's really all you need to referentially tie something in your database or decentralized system back to the Helium blockchain.
Right. I totally agree. And I think, I love that perspective on sort of predictability and simplicity. I used to work for a payments company, and then one of the things that our merchants really cared about was that sort of every morning they got paid for the day before, and that sort of helped them with their payroll, and like it was like very, very predictable. And we definitely had early on, it was a startup, and early on we had outages, and usually the outages happened over the weekend. Every Monday morning, our merchants would get the largest payment that they would, because they had all of their cards that they accepted over the weekend. And for some businesses that were sort of weekend heavy, this is a really important payment. And like knowing that they were getting it consistently on that Monday morning, because it usually was like the moment that they initiated all their payroll checks, because payroll usually gets pulled like a Tuesday so that they could get paid on Friday. Like there was a whole sort of organization and sort of process around I get paid, I pay my employees, and then my employees come back the next weekend. So like having that sort of very regular cycle of payment was really important for our merchants, and I can imagine the same thing for some of your hosts. Having this be very regular, they sort of know, here's what I'm getting paid, and I'm going to get paid on this day. I can see the value in that as well.
So you mentioned something about NFTs earlier, and I want to come back to that. I hear
Sure.
some whispers. I hear there's a project going on relating to Helium and NFTs. I actually heard more than a whisper. I literally saw it announced on Twitter, but I like to make things seem more mysterious than they are. But yeah, really interesting, mysterious, exciting thing to be announced. We're recording this the night before the Bitcoin conference in Miami. There's going to be so much cool stuff happening, and I see that one of the things that's happening is in less than 24 hours, Helium Zodiac NFTs. Please tell us more.
For sure. So yeah, so this idea of NFT is an old one. I love supporting artists like that. That's where I do have a love for NFTs because of that. And ultimately there's a lot of questions around what are NFTs, what's ownership, where's the and I don't want to go into all of those today, but ultimately like I actually started thinking about NFTs back when it's actually a perfect segue, this word splitting. We couldn't have made it. This conversation could have been more well structured because we thought about I brought this up as something that we should consider doing. What if every entity that was rewardable on the Helium blockchain was an NFT? That was sort of the initial idea. So, an HST, a hotspot, and a validator, right? And those are sort of rewardable entities. What if they were NFTs? And then how about other entities that are on their blockchain? An OUI is another example. Like what if that is something that's owned, that's on the network? Really, these are the assets that have other effects on the network. They might be rewarded, they might be consumers of packets. What if they were NFTs and they could be representative as NFTs? What if they could be subdivided, have multiple owners, maybe through a multi-sig? All of those things were sort of ideas that we had at this point. It feels like many months ago. And I was excited to see the reward splitting hip because it was like internally it was joked. The joke was it's a Bison NFT hip, and of course like that. I loved it so much for that reason, and maybe I liked it more because of that back then. I wasn't thinking about chain bloat at the time, but so I've always wanted to think about like we have these beautiful names for all of our hotspots. But the team, Bones, I think specifically, created this hash, and it was the hash of the public key. It created the angry purple tiger, right? The adjective, color, animal name, and yeah, there's some dupes in there, and I think there's like 80 some odd dupes at this point. But these are names; these are real names, and they could be represented as entities on this blockchain. They could be NFTs. So that's been in the back of my mind for God, it feels like months now. A little while ago, I sort of pitched this idea of what if we could mint special hotspots, right? And we could say these are very special. We have these original hotspots that we created back in 2019, and we only have like I think at this point, since I just took 12 of them away, like we might only have like 50 of them left, period, that have never been asserted on chain. At least in our possession, I'm sure there are others that have some OGs lying around that they've never asserted. Please plug in your hotspots, provide some coverage.
Come on, guys. We need
like,
you.
Come on, bring it in. Like, bring it in. We're expecting you to come, right? But these 12, we found unique names. We were able to sort of build art around it, around that name, sort of representing each one of these hotspots. And we decided that we needed a platform to do this. And but the first thought obviously is what are the largest platforms for building NFTs? That you have things like Foundation, Mirror, and other things that's on Ethereum. And those are super interesting, very fully featured, but incredibly expensive to mint, right? And we weren't looking to spend a lot of money on minting them because we wanted to actually give the proceeds of this to charity. And so we wanted to figure out is there another option out there? And so we spoke to some friends at the Solana team, and they told us about this idea that's happening in their community called Metaplex. They're working on this project. It'll be ready by BTC Miami, and we said, well, I guess we better hurry and make some art. And so we made 12 special pieces of art. These are cards, and actually would love to show some to you if we can screen share and figure this out.
I would love to see them. I'm so excited.
Awesome. All right, let's do it. So we decided to build a marketplace, and we used a platform that the Solana team actually, it's not even the Solana team; it's the Solana ecosystem. They built a separate foundation called the Metaplex Foundation, and they built a marketplace that allows creators like us, or sort of other creators like musicians and artists, to create NFTs. In the Solana blockchain, I know you're a fan, and but maybe some of your listeners don't know that the costs are incredibly low. The speed of this blockchain it's an incredibly fast chain, and it's really meant for very, very generic smart contracts. The Metaplex team built really sort of simple smart contracts on the Solana blockchain to allow creators like us to create NFTs and store it on Arweave. The cool thing about Arweave is you sort of pay upfront and it's stored forever, rather than you're sort of paying by use later. So it sort of combined the Arweave things, the Solana things, and with some auction dynamics. You can do auctions that are tiered. You can have participation NFTs for being part of the auction. You can do all sorts of like really interesting things. We kept it really simple. Our NFTs are cards, and these cards represent an original Helium hotspot. And the sort of interesting part of our NFTs is that you can redeem, if you're the owner, you can redeem for the actual hotspot with the exact same name. And that's something that we were excited about. And so we're doing this for the first time for these 12 hotspots that we have on hand, with these names that we have on hand. And I just kind of want to scroll and show you kind of what we made. So these are the cards, or at least one view of the cards. So we have, a snail, a griffin, a kestrel, a bull, a bison, a mandrill, an ape, an albatross, a lobster, a hamster, a llama, and a snake. And we really wanted these cards to be something that you can like touch and feel and play with. So like if you interact with these things, you can kind of see that they sort of have a shape. They have a color, and each one of these colors actually matters. And the hamster is actually one of my favorites. Yeah,
it's holographic. Jesus, I want it already.
And then I also really love the bull, and it's just this beautiful gold. And this art was made by our two design team members, Pete and Bello. They are incredible like minds when it comes to building just beautiful things. And you can see that in all of the work of everything that we've built in Helium.
Oh, yeah.
They really, really care about UX, and I think this is one of the things I love about Helium as a network and Helium Systems as a company. We really want to make UX be really, really, really sort of at the forefront, and that's been the way from the beginning, right? Our hotspots are super simple. The app is super easy to use. That's been our approach, and like we want things to be accessible and simple. And so these are the cards, but what's really interesting is that it's not just about the cards, but it's also about the video that goes with the card. And so I want to show you that. I don't think you've had a chance to see this ever, so
no.
do that too. So there's a video, and I'm going to show you I'll show you a few of the videos. So here's the ape, and I just kind of want to show you like what it looks like and like sort of how it moves. Because it really is beautiful. Like the card
beautiful.
Floats super well on the website, but you can kind of see what this thing is. And then I want to show you one more.
Okay.
And and it sounds like you really like the which one did you like? I'll show you that.
Oh, the hamster is nuts. What the hell?
Yeah, see the hamster? Okay, let's have a look at the hamster.
Not to give it all away, but geez, the holographicness of that was just
right.
Pokemon cards, man.
I'll stop sharing one. This one is why it looks the way it does is because it's actually translucent.
Oh wow.
And so
people are gonna go for this one. This is gonna be that. This is my prediction. This is the one. This is the one that's gonna get bidded up like crazy.
Well, I would love to see it. Ultimately, all of this is for charity, and we decided to support the Give India COVID relief initiative. They have a few different initiatives that they're supporting. One is sort of getting oxygen to people. A lot of people in India are recovering from the illness at home, but they still need oxygen. This is something that is also very personal to me. I have family in India, and so I'm really glad that we found a group that's directly supporting folks in India to get oxygen at home. And then they're also like helping develop care centers, like where you actually can go and be if you're afflicted and be supported as you're sort of recovering, hopefully, from this horrible disease that's been keeping us locked in and for over a year now. we thought that this conference was for the crypto community is like one of the first opportunities for folks to get back together. But there are parts of the world that aren't able to do this yet, and we wanted to support that right now. Even though some members of the crypto community can come together because we've done different things here, and we're sort of in a different part of the pandemic than other parts of the world.
Well, it's such a good cause, and it's really truly heartbreaking what's happening in India. And I've been watching, and my thoughts go out to everyone who's affected by it, you and your family members, and just everyone else, the global community at large. It's not over for everyone, as you said. And I think if we can offer support in any way, that's something that we should all make a goal. And so I think this is a really awesome charity auction. There are so many things that I love about this. I'm not really one to get excited about NFTs in their current form. I think that, there's a lot of potential there. I used to play a lot of video games like World of Warcraft when I was younger, and that's kind of like the stuff that gets me excited when I think about NFTs, is like rare swords and stuff.
Of course,
but
yeah.
This is like a seriously beautiful implementation of NFTs. The Metaplex project is really interesting. It just kind of came out of nowhere, and it seems like it's beautifully implemented. It's running on Solana. That's so huge. I mean, I can't overstate how huge that is. I get so frustrated when I see new projects, especially NFT projects launching, and they're like launching on Ethereum today, and I'm like, it's such a waste. It's really such a waste to launch anything on Ethereum, because you're limiting yourself to such a small crowd, or you're limiting yourself to having to use some layer 2, which is going to end up just fragmenting the ecosystem. And so the fact that you guys could do this on Solana in a place where truly everyone can have access and participate, and the transaction costs are like 1/100th of a cent, I think that's really going to bring in, first of all, people to the Solana ecosystem, but also just provide accessibility that is not typical in these types of projects or auctions, by just the virtue of people not having to pay $150 to submit one transaction, just to submit a bid. And so I think I'm super excited to see how this goes in terms of how much these cards are bidded up. I will definitely be submitting some bids myself. I can't get enough of OG hotspots. They're so beautiful, and they're just like iconic. And I think not only are they going to be worth a lot in terms of money in the future, I think they're going to just be like worth a lot to me in the future, because Helium has been just like such a big part of my life in the last year and a half. So how can people get involved? Like what's the launch going to look like? I see that there's a countdown timer. If you go to zodiac.helium.com right now. So when that timer ends, are we going to have to like jump on it as soon as possible? Like what kind of wallets should people have ready? Like what are the steps?
That's a great question. Yeah. So you won't need to jump in immediately. First of all, the auction's going to run for 12 days, starting Friday around 12:15 Pacific time, and so people will have time to set up their wallets. We're not looking for a mad rush here. The ecosystem around wallets is new in the Solana side of things compared to something like Ethereum, but it's really like. I think it's actually fairly well developed. I mean, there's some really incredible wallets that people are using these days. There's Phantom, which is I think my favorite, and the secret. So it has a beta invite code that you need to get, but the secret that I've heard is that if you go onto their Discord, you can find it very easily. It's not very hard to get the secret beta invite code, and I hope that team doesn't hate me for saying that.
I hope I don't get sued on this podcast for leaking.
Yeah, we're both gonna get yelled at and kicked out of the Solana ecosystem for that, I guess.
God forbid we grow their users.
But no, to their credit, it is a beautiful product. I think, and I'm sure you've used MetaMask before, and I have too, and it's just way better than MetaMask as well. And I'll give them credit for really building something, like learning from where MetaMask could have been better. And I think they did a really good job there. There's also things like Soleil, which has been in the or Solette. I don't know how people say it.
I call it Solid, but I love Soleil. I think let's just go with that.
It might be Solid. I might be completely wrong. I'm gonna get yelled at by somebody else. Like, great, I'm just making all sorts of enemies today. So I think that's going to be great as well. And the other thing, to sort of bring on, I think FTX Pay is going to allow you to sort of onboard via fiat as well. And so the auction will be done in Sol, in Sol tokens. And our goal at the end of this auction is to donate this either directly in Sol, or we'll probably try to convert it to fiat in a safe way, and donate it directly to the Give India campaign.
Are you guys going to have any other presence at the Bitcoin Miami conference other than this, or is this the big thing?
This is the big thing, and in fact, like none of the core devs are going to be there. But Scott, who's the director of the DY, will be there, and some of our investors will be there, and they'll certainly be talking about about this. We decided not to go. We're a small team, and we didn't exactly know how we would fit in this one conference. Certainly, we will be part of other conferences in the future, and this is something that we thought that we could do from afar, and we had the support of the Metaplex team here, and they were able to help us bring something out.
How did you guys get in contact with the Metaplex team? I'm curious how you linked up there.
Through one of our early company investors. So the multi-coin folks are also investors in Solana, and so we reached out. I said, hey, Tushar, like, I don't want to mint this on Ethereum, but that is the best option right now. What are my options? What are my options in other platforms that are out there? And this kind of the timing was perfect. And yes, there's a lot of beta testing, and there's a lot of new code that we had to encounter. But some of those engineers are incredible. I work with some of the Solana engineers who are just like absolute monsters. They're so good.
They really are. I've been watching them for a while, and I've been participating in their ecosystem as a validator, and it's just been, I'm literally not a day goes by that I'm not like blown away by something that they do, or just like how solid their product is, or how solid their design is, or just how long term they're thinking. Just tons of credit to the Solana team. I think Helium and Solana have not only social connections and business connections, but I think you guys have a very similar spirit and the drive to just create something that's very focused and very high quality. So, hats off to both teams on this project.
Yeah, no, we couldn't have done this without them, because we certainly were not going to be building NFTs on the Helium blockchain, kind of to our earlier point. Like, it's not something that we should be doing.
Well, Abhay, thanks so much for talking about all of this exciting stuff that's happening. We're all looking forward to Validators. We are all looking forward to this launch tomorrow. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I really recommend that everyone who's listening go check out the Phantom wallet, maybe try Solid or Solflare. Just get accustomed to the Solana ecosystem. You're going to have to figure out a way to get Sol tokens. I'll leave that up to you. But there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there. And, I want you guys to be prepared for this auction starting tomorrow. Is there anything else that you would like to shout out or add on before we wrap up here?
Do I have one more thing? I think just a thank you to this community that we have. And Arman, I know you spend a lot of time. You're a moderator on the Helium Discord, and you have hosts that depend on you, and you also help a lot of folks in the community. And so first, shout out to you, and thank you. And I think this podcast is a wonderful introduction to what we are as a community. I loved, obviously it's fun to see Tushar and Amir on this podcast, but I actually love the kind of intro podcast that you did with new community members. Like, that by far, I think, was my favorite episode that you've done, because I think that's what our community really is. We're incredibly welcoming to new folks to crypto, and to new folks in IoT, and new folks in Helium. And that's what I want to be forever. And 70,000 Discord members today, 100,000 Discord members, whenever that is, 200,000 hotspots, a million hotspots. Like, I want that community, that sort of almost like, we are very personable. We are very welcoming to new members, and that's and I think you're a big part of that. And I think the community at large, does a lot to make people feel welcome. That's why I'm here. I want to build that community.
Well, that's why I'm here too. And I just want to forward your welcome and your thanks to anyone who is listening to this podcast for the first time. Like, if this is your first episode, thank you. Just thank you for listening. I'm constantly amazed by the amount of support we're getting. We're like hanging out in the top 50 like US tech podcasts now, which is like, I don't know how I got here, but I couldn't have done it without, all the work that the Helium team has done and all the work that other community members have done. I think Helium is one of those things that's just so obviously new and awesome that people are really willing to drop other things once they realize like how real it is, and sort of like put their all into it. And that's what gives me the most faith in the future of Helium, is just that like when people go all in on this project and really get involved, they don't really turn around. I haven't really seen any community members leave. So really looking forward to just the future growth, and thanks to everyone for being active participants, and thanks to you for showing up today and having this chat with me.
For sure. Absolutely. Love to talk to you.
I hope you have a great rest of your night. It's not much night left. Get some good sleep before the conference.
Worse for you.
Oh, God. Yeah. East Coast, baby. All right. All righty. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Hotspot. If you love our content and want to support us even more, please consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts and leaving your honest review. This will help the podcast reach more people and educate them about the Helium Network.